What happens to debt when you die? Dealing with the financial obligations of a loved one who has passed away can be a complex process, especially when it comes to understanding the different types of debts involved and the responsibilities of the executor. Types of debts. When a person passes away, their debts can generally be categorized into three main types, each of which has its own implications and priorities. Secured debts. Secured debts are those tied to specific assets or collateral, such as a mortgage or an auto loan. In New Jersey, these debts are typically associated with the property in question. If the deceased had a secured debt, it's essential to determine whether the asset will be retained or sold to cover the outstanding balance. Unsecured debts. Unsecured debts, on the other hand, are not tied to any collateral. Credit card debts and medical bills often fall into this category. In New Jersey, these debts are typically paid from the deceased's estate, following a specific order of priority, and are typically the last to get paid if there are remaining funds from the decedent's estate. Credit card debt. Credit card debt is typically held against the estate rather than the surviving family members of a decedent. However, if another person co-signed on the credit card, that person may be held responsible for paying any outstanding debt. Student loan debt. For private student loans, co-signers may continue to be liable following a person's death. For federal student loans, the debts are forgiven upon the debtor's death. It may be possible to negotiate a pardon on the debt, but it is dependent on the loan's specific circumstances. If the debt is not pardoned, it will be held against the decedent's estate rather than against the surviving family members. Medical debt. Although they are considered unsecured debt, medical debt may be passed along to a deceased person's spouse under the doctrine of necessaries. Priority debts. Priority debts are a special category that takes precedence over other debts in New Jersey. These may include funeral expenses, taxes owed to the state or federal government, and administrative costs associated with the estate's management. Executors should be aware that these debts need to be addressed before other claims on the estate. Debts and the deceased person's estate. When someone passes away, their estate becomes a central component in managing their debts. A deceased person's assets are typically classified into two main categories: estate assets and non-estate assets. Estate assets include property and possessions that are subject to probate and become part of the deceased person's estate. In New Jersey, these assets are used to settle outstanding debts and distribute the remaining assets to beneficiaries as per the decedent's will or state law if there's no will. Non-estate assets, on the other hand, are those that do not go through the probate process and are typically exempt from the deceased's outstanding debts. These assets may include assets held in joint tenancy with right of survivorship, assets in living trusts, life insurance proceeds with named beneficiaries, retirement accounts with designated beneficiaries, certain types of jointly held bank accounts. Debt notification in probate. During probate, the executor of the deceased person's estate plays a crucial role in managing and resolving their outstanding debts. They are also responsible for various tasks related to debt management. Identifying and managing debts. The executor must identify all outstanding debts of the deceased, including the type, amount, and creditor information. This involves thorough documentation and communication with creditors. Asset evaluation. Assessing the value of the deceased's assets and ensuring that there are sufficient assets to cover the debts, especially secured and priority debts. Notification to creditors. In accordance with New Jersey law, the executor must provide proper notice to creditors, allowing them a chance to make claims against the estate. Debt prioritization. Executors must follow the legal order of priority when paying off debts. Priority debts, like taxes and funeral expenses, should be addressed before lower priority unsecured debts. Negotiating with creditors. Executors may need to negotiate with creditors to settle outstanding debts, potentially arranging for partial payments or debt forgiveness in some cases. How long do creditors have to collect a debt from an estate in injury? Once an individual passes away, creditors have a specific period to present their claims against the estate. This period is limited to 9 months from the date of the decedent's death. During this 9-month period, creditors are expected to formally file their claims. If a creditor fails to make a claim within this timeframe, they typically lose the opportunity to collect the debt from the estate. This rule is put in place to ensure that the administration of the estate can be completed in a timely manner and that the beneficiaries can receive their inheritance without unnecessary delay. After 9 months, if no claims have been filed, the executor of the estate may proceed with distributing the assets among the beneficiaries. Once this distribution is complete, the executor can also issue a declaration of discharge, effectively closing the estate from further claims. Debt settlement after death. Funeral expenses. Funeral expenses are typically considered a top priority in New Jersey when it comes to settling a deceased person's debts. These expenses include the costs associated with the funeral service, burial or cremation, and related services. Executors and administrators of the estate should ensure that funeral expenses are paid promptly to provide a respectful and dignified farewell to the deceased. Taxes. Both state and federal taxes, including income taxes and property taxes, are considered priority debts in New Jersey. It's crucial to address any outstanding tax liabilities promptly, as tax authorities often have significant powers to collect unpaid taxes from the deceased person's estate. Administrative costs. Administrative costs associated with managing the deceased person's estate, such as legal fees, executor fees, and other related expenses, are generally considered priority debts in New Jersey. Judgments against the deceased. If there are any court judgments against the deceased individual, these judgments may also be considered priority debts in New Jersey. Unsecured debts. Executors and administrators must follow the legal requirements and ensure that priority debts are addressed before lower priority unsecured debts. Properly managing these priorities is crucial to ensure that the estate is settled in compliance with New Jersey's bankruptcy laws and to protect the interests of creditors and beneficiaries. Who can be held liable for the deceased's debt? Potential liability of heirs and beneficiaries. Heirs and beneficiaries of the deceased's estate may also face potential liability for the decedent's debts. However, this liability is generally limited to the extent of the assets they inherit from the estate. Potential liability of spouses. For married individuals, spouses are generally not automatically liable for their spouse's debts solely by virtue of being married. New Jersey employs a legal framework known as common law property, or an equitable distribution system when it comes to marital property and debt. Debts incurred by one spouse in their name alone are typically considered their individual, separate debts. These debts are generally not automatically transferable to the other spouse upon death, nor are they automatically inherited by the surviving spouse in probate. Joint bank accounts. In accordance with New Jersey bankruptcy laws, the surviving account holders may be held liable for any debts owed from the joint account, even if they were not the primary contributor to those debts. It's important to carefully review the terms and agreements associated with joint accounts and seek legal advice if needed. Co-signed loans. In accordance with New Jersey bankruptcy laws, co-signers may have a legal obligation to repay the debt, even if they were not the primary beneficiary of the loan proceeds. Survivors who are co-signers should be aware of their potential liability and take appropriate steps to address any outstanding debts. How does a debtor's death affect bankruptcy proceedings? Debt discharge in bankruptcy. Understanding which debts can be discharged in bankruptcy is crucial when considering this option for the deceased's estate. Which debts can be discharged? In New Jersey, bankruptcy can lead to the discharge of many types of unsecured debts, including credit card debt, medical bills, and personal loans. However, certain debts, such as child support, alimony, student loans, in most cases, and some tax debts, generally cannot be discharged through bankruptcy. Impact on survivors. Bankruptcy's impact on survivors depends on their involvement in the deceased's financial affairs and the nature of their obligations. Survivors who were co-borrowers on the deceased's debts may still be liable for those debts, even if the deceased's estate goes through bankruptcy. Survivors who were not directly tied to the deceased's debts may be less affected, but they should be aware of potential impacts on the estate's assets and distribution. Don't face this complex process alone. Contact us today at 732-341-3800 for a confidential consultation to discuss your specific situation and find out how we can assist you in managing the financial affairs and debts of your loved one's estate with care, compassion, and legal experience. Your peace of mind and financial security are our top priorities.